something. What do you do? In our time of instant communication, we might send a text, a WhatsApp message, a FaceTime call. In years past, we might have picked up the phone. We might have written a letter. Do you remember those? Yeah? In even more distant past, we might have visited. And this is what Mary does. Now, is she doing the visiting actually because she's the one who's in trouble, stressed, and anxious? Is she in fact fleeing Nazareth, unable to bear the suspicious glances of the village women and the constant head-scratching puzzlement of her husband-to-be? Or is she responding to Elizabeth's need, a barren woman pregnant, bizarrely and divinely pregnant, and 6 months on? Clearly, news does not travel fast in those parts, and Elizabeth's desire to keep the pregnancy secret has worked. That's a massive achievement in a village. She must have really kept herself in seclusion. Maybe it's both impulses that take Mary on her journey. Excitement and fear for Elizabeth, excitement and fear for herself. Now, it's argued that there are various stylistic themes in literature. 1, a person goes on a journey. 2, a stranger arrives in town. Or 3, something or someone is born. Well, in our story today, we have 2 of these themes. Mary goes on a journey, and something is born. Babies aren't born yet, though John does his wonderful leaping in Elizabeth's womb. Rather, a vision is born. The vision of the Magnificat, where the proud are scattered, the mighty cast down, the lowly ones are lifted up, the hungry are filled with good things, and promises are fulfilled. In the encounter, in the meeting of these 2 women, the old and the young, the infertile one and the virgin, a vision is born. 2 women who on paper should not have been able to birth anyone, can and do both give birth physically and also give birth to this vision. And let's think about the context of this remarkable and generative meeting. Mary and Elizabeth are living in a time of deep insecurity. There's an occupying army, there are dangerous neighbors, there is political unrest. It's a context that we can recognize. And it's in this context, in this difficult place, that Mary finds herself at peace. And she does that by her attention and her intention. She pays attention to the voice of the angel. She really listens to what the angel has to say. She can't resolve everything. There must have remained big questions, but the attention she pays allows her to find peace. Who do we pay attention to? Who do we listen to? The news is pretty miserable, isn't it? Social media? Who do you follow? Whose opinion do you trust? How do you check out what you're told? And maybe let's not just think about external voices that we pay attention. What about internally? What internal voice do you listen to? Do you have a voice inside you that tells you that you're not good enough? That you're a failure? That you're not a beautiful person? That actually you're a bit of a disappointment? Do you pay attention to that voice? And what does it do to you when you do? Mary pays attention to the voice of God, to the voice of the messenger of God. Now, we may not have quite the same access to the voice of God, but does that mean we shouldn't try and pay attention to what he's saying and by whom, through whom God is saying it? Because the voice of God might be saying, you are beautiful, precious, beloved, known, utterly and completely. And yes, utterly, because God knows all the icky bits, and he loves you, and loves you and loves you. And maybe if we heard the good news stories, the stories of hope and comfort and bravery and inspiration, and I really don't mean Megan's podcasts, if we paid attention to the goodness and the kindness in our world, how would that change us as people? There's actually a website called Positive News, which just does good news stories. I commend it to you. And of course, we need to be informed about the dangerous and difficult places in our world. And of course, we need to hear the voices of those who've been hurt and abused by others. But there must be a counter-narrative too. From the attention comes the intention. And Mary finds that her intention, as she describes it in the Magnificat, aligns with the prophets. She delights in the way that this miraculous conception will become a wellspring of divine mercy and kingdom justice. From the attention comes the intention. What are our intentions as individuals and as a church? If we're paying attention to the voice of God in our lives, what intentions flow from that? Well, I can't answer for you as individuals, but as a church, well, our intention is to be multi-generational, i.e. a church that welcomes and values the voice of everyone, from child to elder. A church that is welcoming and inclusive, a church that is honest and loving. Those are our intentions. What does it look like in practice? Well, it's a church where it's okay to make mistakes and forgiveness abounds, where people can have a go at something without fear of censure, and it's a place where people leave better equipped to share their faith. I did say this was an intention, not necessarily a reality yet. Yeah? And how do we do this? Well, it's back to that, what do we pay attention to? We pay attention to the Bible. We pay attention to what God might be saying to us in our times of prayer. And we pay attention to our community, open to the voices that may show us and speak to us of God's will. Where are the voices of the lowly that need to be lifted up? And we pay attention to each other, because the attention we pay informs the intentions we have. And we don't do it from a place of perfection. There is no such thing as a perfect church. There will not be a time when everybody is getting everything right, when relationships are beautiful, when everyone agrees, when the choir is wearing robes again, then everything will be perfect. Yeah? Simon said, "You're not going to say that, are you?" I said, "Oh, yes, I am." Because, we have these intentions in the midst of imperfection. There's a Hopi Indian saying about what you do in the time of crisis, and they refer to it as the time you have to let go of the riverbank and paddle in the middle of the river. And their solution as to what you do when you find yourself swirling around in all the currents of the river is quite surprising. It is. See who is with you and celebrate. That's what Mary and Elizabeth did. They found the only other person they knew to be in the same boat of being impossibly pregnant. See who is with you and celebrate. And when they met, John leapt for joy in Elizabeth's womb. Mary's pregnancy must have felt validated and truly God-given. Do we do this? So rather than moaning and bewailing a time that was, a time perhaps of the past, what about looking around now and saying, wow, because I don't know this church any other time other than now. And I look around and I see who is here and I celebrate. Because, we're quite a remarkable church community. I mean, we're all a bit bonkers. I mean, I do say we. And we're flawed, and of course we have bad days and days when we don't get it right. But I look round and I celebrate. And of course there is room for more. Of course there is room for many more young people, isn't there, And for doubters and seekers and anyone who wants to come. Of course there is. But in the midst of our troubled times, isn't there the same strength and joy that Mary and Elizabeth found when they reached out to each other and realized they were not alone and met together? And even when it's freezing cold and we're all thinking, oh my goodness me, why am I here? And then you look round and you go, wow, they came too. They braved it. Aren't they amazing? And there's such strength in community, be that a community of 2 or 47 and a half or 150. There are good people to pay attention to here. There is space to pay attention to God. And here is where visions can become reality, when our attention leads to intention. And that is something we do with those around us. See who is here and celebrate. Amen.